some very strange and unpleasant activities have been going on, I'm afraid to say that I'm not the person who can shed light on it for a number of reasons, one of which is that I wasn't there long enough.
What if I told you the man the world saw as charming, confident, and untouchable was hiding something his own staff was too afraid to talk about? Behind the towering walls of Buckingham Palace, one young maid thought she had landed the opportunity of a lifetime serving Prince Andrew, Duke of York. But it didn't take long before excitement turned into quiet confusion, and then something far more unsettling. At first, it was just small things, easy to ignore. Until one small moment exposed something so strange, it changed the way she saw him forever. And she wasn't the only one. The brave maid who finally spoke out. Charlotte Briggs was just 21 when she landed the job at Buckingham Palace in the mid-1990s. She thought she had won the lottery of life, working inside the royal walls, serving one of the most famous families on earth. It felt like stepping into a fairy tale. But reality hit fast. The moment staff realized she had been assigned to Prince Andrew's private apartments, the mood changed. Faces dropped. Voices went quiet. Nobody said much, but they didn't have to. The message was clear. She was walking into something nobody else wanted. At first, Charlotte tried to ignore the warnings. She told herself people were exaggerating. After all, this was a prince, a war hero, someone the world admired. But inside those private rooms, the truth was impossible to hide. His reputation wasn't just talk, it was real. Staff already knew about his tantrums, his sweary outbursts, and his nasty, arrogant behavior. Simple tasks suddenly carried enormous pressure. Nothing felt safe. Nothing felt predictable. One moment could be calm. The next could turn ugly without warning. Workers learned quickly to stay quiet, stay careful, and never attract attention. What shocked Charlotte most was how normal everyone acted about it. This wasn't treated like a rare bad day. It was treated like routine, like something expected, like something nobody could change. Experienced staff had already accepted it. Some avoided him completely. Others endured it in silence. Nobody challenged it. Nobody stopped it. Can you imagine that? Grown adults, trapped in fear of one man's unpredictable moods inside one of the most powerful buildings in the world. Outside, everything looked perfect. The public saw confidence, discipline, control. He smiled for the cameras. He waved like everything was normal. But inside, the staff saw something completely different. They saw someone unhinged, someone who expected absolute obedience, someone who treated the people around him like they existed only to serve his smallest demands. The contrast was disturbing, almost unbelievable. Charlotte stayed quiet for years. Like many others, she carried the memories and moved on. Life outside the palace continued, but the truth stayed buried inside her. Then in 2022, after decades of silence, she finally said what nobody else had dared to say publicly. She described him as horrible, nasty, not misunderstood, not strict, nasty. Her words cut through the royal image like a knife, because this wasn't a rumor. This was someone who had lived inside his private world. The creepy teddy bear ritual. Nothing prepared Charlotte Briggs for what she found inside the private bedroom of Prince Andrew, Duke of York, at Buckingham Palace. It wasn't a painting, it wasn't antique furniture, it wasn't anything one might expect from a grown man of status and war hero reputation. Instead, sprawled across his massive four-poster bed, occupying the center of the room like a miniature army, were 72 teddy bears. Not hidden, not tucked away. Dozens of them, each positioned in perfect unyielding order. Many wore tiny sailor outfits, souvenirs collected from ports around the world during his naval service. Each bear had a specific role, a precise place. It was immediately clear that these weren't toys. They were instruments of obsession, symbols of a mind that refused to grow up. A man clinging to childhood comforts in a world where adults were expected to act responsibly. Charlotte didn't stumble into this world unprepared. Before she could ever touch the bears, she was given a full day of training. She was shown laminated diagrams and instructed in the exact rules of placement. The biggest bears went at the back, the next size forward, gradually down to the tiniest at the very front. Two bears, favorites among the collection, had their own mahogany thrones beside the bed, sitting upright as if they were kings of this strange private kingdom. The rest formed a regimented formation on the bed, each lined up in size order, each perfectly balanced, perfectly angled. One wrong tilt, one misaligned paw, and the whole display had to be redone. The ritual wasn't just encouraged, it was enforced. Precision was demanded with the kind of intensity normally reserved for high-stakes military drills, yet applied to stuffed animals. Every morning, Charlotte spent half an hour meticulously arranging the bears. She lifted each one, adjusted its position, stepped back to assess, realigned, and repeated. The process was exacting. There was no improvisation, no margin for error. A tiny deviation could provoke his instant fury. Staff quickly learned the rules. A misplaced bear was more than a minor annoyance. It was a dangerous error. This wasn't about cute collectibles. It was about power, control, and the terrifying lengths to which a grown man could manipulate his environment to suit his childish whims. The morning ritual ended with the two favorites firmly in place on their thrones, the rest standing in solemn formation across the bed. Each bear was a testament to his obsession and his unrelenting need to dominate the smallest details of his private world. The nighttime routine was no less obsessive. Each bear had to be removed from the bed, the smaller ones stacked inside an unused fireplace in perfect size order, the others placed with absolute care around the room. The favorites remained on their miniature thrones. Nothing could be left haphazard. The process required another half hour of exacting attention before he would allow anyone to leave the room. For Charlotte and other staff, this wasn't a harmless quirk. It was a psychological gauntlet, a daily test of endurance and composure. One misstep could unleash the infamous outbursts staff dreaded. One wrong angle, one incorrectly aligned paw could make the day miserable, frightening, and humiliating. For those outside the palace, Prince Andrew projected charm, confidence, and discipline. A war hero, a royal. In public, he was admired, respected, untouchable. Inside these walls, however, he was something else entirely. A man incapable of basic adulthood. A man trapped in a private world where inanimate objects commanded more loyalty than living humans. He treated stuffed toys with a level of care, attention, and emotional weight far exceeding what he granted the people working closest to him. In this strange, rigid world, the teddies were the only beings whose preferences mattered, whose positions were non-negotiable, whose approval, or rather perfect alignment, was demanded daily. The psychological implications were staggering. Psychologists later pointed to classic Peter Pan syndrome, a man with military rank and royal privilege, expected to navigate adult responsibilities, yet emotionally arrested. The teddy bear army was no mere collection. It was a manifestation of his dependence on control, comfort, and unchallenged authority. It revealed a paradox. A decorated Falklands veteran, trained to lead, fight, and make split-second life-or-death decisions, reduced in private life to enforcing precise rituals over stuffed animals. The bears weren't harmless playthings. They were instruments of obedience and evidence of a mind unwilling or unable to confront real-world adulthood. Staff obeyed. They followed the diagrams. They endured the scrutiny. They lived in quiet fear of disruption. The teddies ruled the room, and by extension, they ruled the staff. Briggs' own words later captured the horror. As soon as I got the job, I was told about the teddies. I even had a day of training. Everything had to be just right. It was so peculiar. Peculiar didn't begin to cover it. The obsessive, unrelenting care for these bears was unnatural, unhinged, even disturbing. It wasn't optional. It wasn't temporary. It was constant, controlling, and exacting. It extended beyond the bed, beyond the bedroom. It dominated how staff moved, how they behaved, and how they survived their daily duties. To disobey, even inadvertently, risked wrath. To fail to understand risked humiliation. It was a power play disguised as a childhood obsession. The infamous teddy bear army did not make the journey. The mahogany thrones sat empty. The meticulous fireplace stacks were abandoned. The regimented bed display, so central to the daily rhythm of life under him, vanished. For those who had witnessed it, it was like the quiet end of an era. No more morning inspections, no more tiny soldiers lined in perfect formation, no more silent, observing toys. It was as if a bizarre, controlling chapter of his private life had finally closed. The petty tyranny. The current incidents were the perfect illustration of Prince Andrew, Duke of York's petty tyranny. In one of the palace's vast rooms, heavy floor-to-ceiling curtains hung behind him. Instead of standing and closing them himself, he summoned Charlotte Briggs, a young maid barely 21, from 4 floors below. She ran up and down those stairs, often more than once per shift, each time obeying exact instructions. Close the curtains, fold them just right, straighten the edges, ensure no light leaked through. Minutes later, the bell rang again. A tiny gap remained. A small fold was off. Light spilled in from the edge. And then the rage began. The shouting was sudden, explosive, rotten with fury. Words nobody should ever speak to another human being were hurled across the room. Tiny imperfections became major disasters in his eyes. On one particular afternoon, a gap no wider than an inch sparked one of his famous outbursts. Charlotte had run those stairs repeatedly, sweat on her brow, lungs burning, only to face a torrent of angry language for a task he could have completed in seconds himself. It was impossible to ignore the stark contrast. The same man who flew dangerous missions over the Falklands, the same man who faced life or death situations in combat, could not summon the energy to stand and pull a length of fabric. The disconnect was staggering. It was unhinged. It was arrogant. And it was cruel. The atmosphere was toxic. Staff learned quickly that the bell was never trivial. Every chime was a potential prelude to humiliation. One cushion is slightly misaligned. A lamp not perfectly centered. Even a thoughtless breath could trigger verbal assaults. Charlotte absorbed the shouting because she had no choice. Speaking back meant immediate dismissal. So she wiped her tears, clenched her jaw, and kept working. The physical toll of running up 4 flights of stairs was matched only by the emotional whiplash that followed. Every sprint left her exhausted. Every insult left her shaken. Every day reinforced the same lesson. This was a man who demanded total obedience without effort or empathy. Senior staff confirmed that his reputation was earned. Nobody wanted his wing. Experienced maids swapped shifts, swapped days, or avoided him entirely. New hires were warned in hushed tones. Watch yourself. He has tantrums. He's nasty. He'll swear at you for no reason. Charlotte's experience was far from unique. Every person assigned to his apartments understood the stakes. A minor mistake could explode into a full-blown ordeal. The palace's gilded halls, otherwise quiet and orderly, became a pressure cooker under his gaze. The light of day didn't reach the fear he imposed inside those private rooms. The contrast between public persona and private behavior was almost grotesque. Outside, he was brave, commanding, confident, decorated with medals, applauded for courage and service. Inside, he relied on others for the simplest tasks, then erupted into venomous tirades if they fell short. Closing a curtain became an exercise in terror. 4 flights of stairs, repeated trips, meticulous alignment, all to satisfy a man who could not be bothered to move himself. Can you imagine that? A veteran of war relying on someone else to complete a task 2 feet away, then exploding in rage when it wasn't done perfectly. It was petty. It was unhinged. It was rotten. Briggs carried these memories long after leaving the palace. The physical exertion, the emotional exhaustion, the tears, they all stayed with her. Each bell ringing in her mind became shorthand for the pattern of abuse. Other staff confirmed the same experiences. They described the constant small humiliations, the dread of being summoned, the hopelessness of perfection that was impossible to achieve. For anyone assigned to him, this was the rhythm of daily life. A world where minor details became major disasters. Obedience was demanded without recognition, and emotional well-being was irrelevant. The current incidents weren't isolated events. They reflected a broader pattern of behavior. Bells for trivial tasks, repeated commands for negligible adjustments, staff terrorized over the smallest imperfections. A private life dominated by childish demands, explosive language, and a total lack of empathy. Andrew's wing became synonymous with fear. To anyone entering, the lesson was clear. Nothing was safe, nothing was private, and nobody mattered except the man and his rigid expectations. For Charlotte, the repeated stair sprints and shouting became a symbol of his entire character. A man who boasted military bravery, yet could not stand to close his own curtains. A man who expected discipline, precision, and loyalty from others, but could not demonstrate any of it himself. The psychological impact was immense. The daily grind of serving a grown man who treated minor tasks as life-or-death crises taught lessons about power, fear, and the absurdity of unchecked authority. Each imperfection, each tiny failure, was met with volcanic rage. And yet, the world outside saw only medals, titles, and charisma. The stark difference left staff bewildered, humiliated, and deeply unsettled. Over time, the story of the curtains became a kind of legend within the palace. Staff told newer hires about the infamous incidents. The bell, 4 flights of stairs, and the tiniest gap became shorthand for all that was rotten and unhinged about his private conduct. Each retelling reinforced the same truth. A man could achieve glory in public, yet display pettiness, cruelty, and laziness behind closed doors. The daily acts of dominance, humiliation, and terror created an environment where fear was routine, exhaustion was mandatory, and obedience was demanded at the cost of human dignity. The roots of the rot. The adult behavior didn't appear overnight. Long before the stuffed bears or the shouting over curtains, there was baby grumbling. The nickname came from his own nanny and stuck because of constant whining, sudden tantrums, and a refusal to accept no as an answer. Even as a small child, he was unrelenting, petulant, and demanding. The palace walls absorbed it all. Staff learned quickly that the boy could erupt at any moment. Requests ignored or resisted were met with tears, cries, or louder demands. The nickname captured the essence of a child who refused limits. A child who would grow into a man equally unwilling to confront responsibility. The early signs were everywhere. He taunted security guards, testing boundaries with calculated mischief. He bullied his younger brother Edward, delighting in mischief that edged into cruelty. Teachers and schoolmates recalled a boy who laughed at others' misfortunes, who expected special treatment simply for being royal. Every incident reinforced a system that catered to him. Instead of correction, the adults around him adapted. Staff smoothed over his outbursts. Family members excused bad behavior as spirited or high energy. The rules of the palace applied to everyone except the boy, who would later demand perfection from his maids. Every indulgence hardened his habits. By the time he reached adulthood, entitlement had calcified into habit. The tantrums evolved, but never ended. The boy who once screamed in the nursery now summoned staff to close curtains 4 flights away. The child who demanded attention became the man who required 72 teddy bears arranged in military-like formation every morning. Courage in war did nothing to change the core. Military medals and public accolades could not erase the private man who clung to childhood comforts and expected obedience from everyone around him. The seeds of rot planted in the nursery had grown into a fully formed tree of adult arrogance and cruelty. Charlotte Briggs witnessed the result firsthand. A young maid was confronted with a man who expected staff to function as extensions of his will. A prince who considered basic self-care beneath him. Every bell, every shouted order, every meticulously arranged teddy bear reflected the same mindset that had been nurtured since childhood. The indulgence he received as a boy had produced a grown man who treated staff like disposable objects. Politeness, respect, or common decency were irrelevant. The expectation was perfection, silence, and absolute obedience. And any deviation was met with explosive anger. The palace culture enabled it. Complaints were silenced. Warnings were ignored. Andrew's status, rank, and family connections protected him from consequences. Staff learned to navigate around moods rather than challenge them. The system bent to him for decades. Quiet endurance replaced accountability. And because no one outside the inner palace walls saw the full picture, the pattern remained hidden from the public. Only when former employees like Charlotte Briggs spoke years later did the world glimpse the consistent thread. The tantrums that began in the nursery continued in the royal apartments. The bullying of siblings evolved into the terrorization of maids. The refusal to accept limits became a lifelong operating system. Understanding the roots makes the adult behavior almost predictable. Baby Grumpling never disappeared. He simply acquired a larger stage, more power, and a gilded audience. Every curtain summoned, every teddy arranged, every shout issued in the private apartments was a direct continuation of the childhood personality. There was no transformation. There was no maturation. What the palace tolerated and enabled as a child became the defining feature of the adult. Every act of cruelty, every demand for perfection, every tantrum was not an isolated incident. It was the adult expression of a lifelong pattern. The pattern also revealed how the system created a monster in the making. What started as childish fits became adult entitlement on steroids. Staff were not just caught in individual episodes of fury. They were trapped in a machine designed to reinforce dependence, obedience, and fear. Every staff member had to anticipate moods, correct errors before they happened, and remain constantly vigilant. The palace didn't just tolerate him, it enabled him, it adapted to him, and by adapting, it allowed a boy nicknamed Baby Grumpling to grow into a man who could terrorize his staff, while the public remained none the wiser. Even the most trivial tasks reflected this dynamic. Simple adjustments, small imperfections, or moments of inattention triggered explosive responses. It was a pattern established decades earlier, nurtured by indulgence, and maintained through fear. The adult Prince Andrew was a product of a system that rewarded tantrums and ignored responsibility. The teddies, the curtain bell, the meticulous arrangements, all of it stemmed from the same core flaw. A boy who had never been taught accountability or empathy, elevated to royal privilege with a world at his feet and a staff under his thumb. Even worse, behind closed doors. The teddy bears and certain rituals were obvious enough, visible to anyone stepping into the room. But behind the closed bedroom doors, the demands grew darker, nastier, and far more degrading. Multiple staff members reported that Andrew left personal messes for maids to handle directly. Soiled tissues were scattered across the floor, often near the meticulously arranged teddy army. Discarded items that required staff to kneel, pick them up, and carry them away, while the prince either ignored the task or watched without a word. It was humiliating, rotten, unbelievably disrespectful. The contrast between the innocent, childlike bear rituals and the very adult, very unpleasant messes created an environment that was both bizarre and emotionally corrosive. Charlotte Briggs and others performed these tasks in silence, aware that speaking up could end careers. Every day, they braced themselves before entering the private quarters. It wasn't part of the job description, and yet it had become routine. They learned to steel themselves, preparing for the emotional whiplash that came from bending to whims that were equal parts petty, unhinged, and degrading. One wrong move, one hesitation, could trigger an angry look or a snide remark. The tension never lifted. It was a constant reminder. The prince's entitlement had no limits, and his disregard for the people serving him was total. The psychological toll on staff was immense. Entering a room brimming with stuffed animals arranged like a military parade, only to find evidence of carelessness and personal mess, jarred the mind. Every perfectly aligned teddy was a symbol of control and precision, but the surrounding chaos, the discarded tissues and remnants of human need, underscored a man who valued objects more than humans. Staff described feeling less than human as they cleaned up, their dignity stripped while their labor ensured the prince's comfort. Can you imagine kneeling to pick up another person's mess in a room filled with toys arranged in rigid perfection, while knowing your own worth was invisible to him? That was the daily reality. These horrors remained secret for years. Confidentiality agreements, fear of reprisal, and the culture of silence in the palace kept these details from public view. Yet, in 2022, Briggs finally broke that silence. Her testimony revealed what countless others had endured quietly for decades. Once she spoke, former staffers came forward, describing the same daily degradation, the same unrelenting sense of being treated like extensions of someone else's ego rather than human beings with dignity. The soiled tissues, the personal messes, the expectation that maids should perform these tasks without complaint or acknowledgement, all of it painted a picture of a man whose arrogance and entitlement knew no bounds. The revelation stripped away the last pretense of royal elegance. Publicly, Andrew was a decorated prince, a war hero, a member of the monarchy. Privately, he treated his private space like a teenager's dorm room and expected professional staff to clean it as if it were their sole responsibility. The juxtaposition was shocking. The world saw charm and medals. Staff lived the opposite: control, rage, and humiliation. Briggs never embellished her accounts. Every detail was drawn from years of lived experience. and the pattern persisted for new maids long after they left. Training still included meticulous teddy arrangements. The unspoken expectation to handle personal messes remained. The palace adapted around him. Staff learned, adjusted, and endured. Andrew never did. His behavior never matured, never corrected, never showed remorse. Every mess left in his wake, every childish demand coupled with adult carelessness, reflected a man unfit to recognize the humanity of those who served him. The disastrous interview. In 2019, Andrew stepped in front of the cameras for a BBC interview meant to restore his image. Instead, he delivered one of the most disastrous performances in modern royal history. The world watched, jaw-droppingly, as he offered explanations that only highlighted his distance from reality. He claimed he couldn't sweat because of a medical condition. He offered a Pizza Express alibi for a critical date. His tone was flat, awkward, and startlingly tone-deaf. Every word, every pause, every forced smile betrayed entitlement, surprise, and a complete disconnect from normal life. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media erupted. Headlines painted him as arrogant, out of touch, and unrelatable. Within days, royal patronages were withdrawn, military titles stripped, and the carefully maintained illusion of the charming, heroic prince collapsed overnight. Viewers didn't just see a man answering questions, they saw the same arrogance, the same obliviousness, and the same inflated sense of self that Briggs and countless palace staff had endured for decades. The interview didn't create the problem, it exposed it. For the first time, millions of people glimpsed what servants had known for years. Behind the public smile and medals was a man incapable of ordinary empathy, ordinary responsibility, ordinary humanity. For Charlotte Briggs, watching the fallout was a surreal mix of vindication and shock. Every detail she had endured, the bell ringing for trivial tasks, the tantrums over curtains, the obsessive teddy rituals, the humiliating private demands, suddenly played out on national television. The private tyrant she had known, the man whose arrogance had made her life miserable for months, finally met public judgment. And the public, unfiltered and unprotected by palace PR, reacted in a way that decades of royal shielding could not prevent. The facade cracked, revealing what the household had long known. The charming prince was a myth. The private man rotten and entitled. Damage control teams scrambled. Press statements were issued. Advisors tried to contain the embarrassment. But the damage was permanent. Andrew stepped back from public duties. Invitations to official events diminished. Family appearances became awkward exercises in tension and silence. The interview became a cultural reference point, a cautionary tale about arrogance, entitlement, and poor judgment. Across the country, people repeated the phrases, mocked the excuses, and reshaped the narrative around a man who had once commanded respect merely by title. By 2026, Andrew's life had changed drastically. Stripped of his HRH style for official use, distanced from major family events, he relocated to Sandringham. The move carried symbolic weight. The Grand Royal Lodge chapter had closed. Sources suggested the famous Teddy collection, the centerpiece of years of obsessive ritual, remained behind, a silent monument to decades of bizarre behavior and private demands. The daily stage that once amplified his tantrums, his whims, his unhinged control, had shrunk. The staff who tiptoed around him now served a smaller household. The tantrums persisted in private, but the spectacle had diminished. Briggs's words echoed louder than ever. The man she described, rotten, narcissistic, unaccountable, had not changed. The system that had protected him for decades finally cracked under its own weight. Public exposure, loss of titles, family distance, and relocation all signaled the consequences of a lifetime of unchecked entitlement. For the first time, what had been private humiliation became public reckoning. Today, the palace presents a modern, carefully managed face to the world. Yet Andrew remains a living reminder of what happens when privilege, power, and indulgence converge unchecked. The public saw the consequences of years of private tyranny. The staff witnessed them daily. And history now records both: the glamorous myth of a royal hero and the unvarnished reality of a man shaped by indulgence, obsession, and decades of unchallenged arrogance. The curtain has fallen, the teddies remain behind, and the lessons of a spoiled prince are laid bare for all to see. And that's the shocking truth hidden behind the gilded walls. If Prince Andrew's private behavior left you stunned, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more jaw-dropping stories and revelations you won't see anywhere else.